Reformed Church.
You know, a lot of times when we think about what we already possess, like our inheritance, unfortunately there's a thing in people's minds to think about like what you're going to have someday, right? Or in the new earth, when the Lord makes everything new, that what we're going to get then or what it's going to be like then. But the funny thing is that that's just a misunderstanding because we don't understand what we've already been given, right? The Lord actually equates the fact that we've been made a new creation, that old things have passed away and that all things have become new, right? That's what we have already experienced, right? That's not going to happen. That already did happen, right? The Bible doesn't say you're going to be made a new creation and old things will be passed away and all things will become new, right? The Lord says that we have been made a new creation. And the funny thing is he equates that in the book of Revelation to the exact same thing. He said he is the God that will make all things new and that all things in the world, right, everything will be made brand new the same way that we have been made brand new. Actually, I believe it's in Romans that he talks about how the newness that we have received on the inside of us, how the glory of God that will fill the earth is the glory that's already on the inside of us. You know, when you think about that, right? The earth will be made new because the glory of God will fill the earth. Think about that. What is it that we're filled with, right? Right? The earth will be filled with the glory of God. But what glory is it that we have in us, right? The glory of God. So the earth will be made new because the glory of God will fill the earth. Isn't it something that is actually what we have received, right? The glory of God. The Bible talks about that we have been glorified, right? We have been glorified as Christ has been glorified, right? Jesus sitting at the right hand of the Father is glorified, and he is the glory that is on the inside of us. So you see why it is that it says that creation waits for the revealing of the sons of God, for the revealing of those that have been made just like their father, right? We were just praying that. A son of God is one that's just like his father, right? And it says that the creation waits, even groans, right? Waiting for the revealing of the sons of God. In other words, waiting for that which is in us to come out, right? That which is in us to come out, right? It's an interesting thing. There's probably a lot more that you can, if you want to catch up with everything that I just shared there's a lot more that you can get on Reform U. A lot of messages there. But you know, with that, with when we think about everything that the Lord has done and that he's given to us, that is obviously a lot of good news, right? For people, you know, for anyone that is sick, for anyone that has experienced any kind of corruption from the world, right? Corruption is anything that has come from sin, and corruption has lots of faces, has lots of different ways that it has impacted people over the years, right? It impacts people's body, it impacts their families, right? It negatively impacts our minds, the way we think. Things degrade in this world, right? But when you begin to preach a gospel to people that lets them know that you can be made new, that you can receive the same spirit, right, that rose Christ from the dead, and that spirit can come and live on the inside of you. In other words, that the spirit of the Father and the spirit of the Son can come and dwell on the inside of you, and that spirit can give life to your mortal body, right? That's Romans chapter 8. That by that same spirit you can give life to our mortal body. Then that begins to sound like really good news, right? For people that are bound in addiction, which again is just another piece of corruption from this world. How awesome is it to know that he came to set us free from the bondage of corruption, right? In other words, all of the things that you hear about that people suffer in this world, all suffering. There is not a single bit of suffering that is not qualified in what I'm saying, right? Jesus came to set the captives free, right? We were captive to a law of sin and death. We were just sharing that in a message called Freedom to the Captives a couple services ago, right? He came to set us free. He was, and it says that in Isaiah 61 that he came and he was anointed to preach the gospel to those that knew and understood their poverty. In other words, that knew and understood that they cannot, right? That's the poor. Obviously, Jesus didn't come to preach to those with no money. Jesus came to preach to those that understand their poverty, right? I could not. Jesus did what I could not do because of the weakness of our flesh. He did what we couldn't do, right? Well, what I'm sharing with you there is, obviously, that's good news, but it makes the good news very singular, right? In other words, what is called the good news, and it's funny because there was there was a time, and not that many years ago, I mean, maybe it might sound like a lot of years ago, but maybe about 20 years ago, 25 years ago or so, I don't know, about 20 years ago or so, when, I would hear the word gospel and I was going to church, but I didn't get it. Like I thought, like gospel must be just like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, right? Because that's what people call the gospels, right? Or the gospel must just be good news. In other words, like when you read the Bible and you hear things that are happy, that sound good, like maybe that's the gospel, right? And you kind of really don't know really what the gospel is. You have kind of like little hints and different things throughout the Bible that, okay, I kind of get it. Maybe that's the gospel. Maybe this is the gospel. But, there is a singularity that the Lord wants us to have. Like if we're going to understand anything, if we're going to be trained in any way, we need to be trained in the gospel, right? There are churches that call themselves, full gospel churches. I don't know what the heck that is, right? But the church itself, like the whole church, not, Methodist, Presbyterian, whatever. It doesn't matter what you call yourselves. The entirety of the church has really actually one gospel, right? In other words, the church itself was founded upon the gospel of Jesus Christ. There is only one gospel, right? And I'll share this with you. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3. He says, "But I fear lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For he who comes preaches another Jesus whom we have not preached, or if you receive a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel which you have not accepted, you may well put up with it." So what he's talking to them about there is, he said, I'm sort of afraid for you, he says, that somebody might come to you and preach another gospel. In other words, preach to you something that sounds like good news. And an example may be, somebody coming to you and say, the Lord, he's promised us that tomorrow is going to be a good day. So I want you to put your head up in the air, stick your chest out and know that tomorrow is going to be a good day because nothing's going to get you down. God is with you. He's not against you. He's for you. And they can tell you all of this stuff and get everybody all worked up. But there's a little bit of information that's missing from that, right? Is that you can hype people up quite a bit. You can get them all excited and all riled up, right? But when it comes down to it, when you don't give someone an assurance, in other words, you can tell me all the good stuff that you want, but I want to know that what you're telling me is sure for me and that I'm qualified for it, right? Because if you don't tell me that this is for me and that nobody can take it from me, if you don't give me the assurance that this is something that I can't lose, then it's not really that good news, is it, right? If it's not something that is mine that nobody can snatch from me, if it's not something that I qualify for, if I have to be at a certain level in my life to be able to receive what you're telling me, then it really isn't good news, right? But the good news about Jesus Christ, in other words, the simplicity, which here in verse number 3, that it says corrupted from the simplicity. That word simplicity is actually singularity, right? He says, but I fear lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve with his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the singularity that is in Christ. In other words, when Eve heard what the serpent was telling her, right? She looked and she said, she felt that what she was looking at and what was being described to her, she said it seemed good to her, right? In other words, people aren't like led away from the gospel because they think, oh, you know what? You're giving me the gospel. That sounds like good news. Now somebody else is going to give me this, but that sounds really, really bad. So I'm going to go with the bad instead of the good. People are not stupid, right? They hear something and they think, wow, like that is good. A deception is not really a deception if it doesn't sound good, right? We can be deceived when we think that something is good, but it really isn't good. In other words, it's intended to seem as though it is good, but it's actually it's falsifying the good news, right? So when Eve saw that it was good, she was led astray, but she was led astray from what? From the goodness that God had for her, right? So when our minds depart from the singularity of the gospel, which is just Jesus, right? And that is it. What Jesus provided for us, right? If what somebody is telling you that you have received, they don't tell you that you have it through Jesus Christ, then it's not sure for you, right? Listen, I've used this example many, many times, but when tragedy happens in someone's life, someone always goes to that person to comfort them, right? What is the basic earthly thing that people tell others? Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay, right? That's people say that because they want to comfort another person. But here's the problem with that, right? You don't know that, right? You're basically lying because you cannot give. How can you tell someone that just went through a tragedy, don't worry about it, it's going to be okay? You don't know. Something worse can happen to them tomorrow than what happened to them today. That's not a surety for them. You can't expect someone, and people swallow that, of course, right? They hear that, oh, thank you. Like they take some level of comfort in the fact that you, who are nobody, told them that tomorrow is going to be okay. But when you tell me that in Christ, right, that it is because of everything that Jesus provided for us, right, we can have a hope and a sure expectation, right, that everything tomorrow is going to turn out for my benefit. Whether it's something that I did right or whether it's something that I did wrong, the Lord will work every single thing out for my benefit, because it's not because of me that He's doing it, but because it's the covenant that I have with Him through Jesus, right? In other words, Christ is my surety. So this is something that even from the time of Abraham, it is the same exact gospel that's been preached. And listen, we have such a rich heritage, right? Such a rich heritage. I mean, people get all wound up in trying to find out where they come from and who your great-great-great-great-grandfather is. You know what? I could really honestly care less. I don't care who my great-great-great-grandfather is, because who he was does not make me who I am. What Jesus did has made me who I am today. I have been made a new creation. The new creation that I am is nothing like what my earthly father used to be. So listen, who your parents were, or who raised you, or who your grandparents were, or anything that is behind you earthly, when you were made new, that lost any hold or influence on your life that it could have, should have nothing, right? Because you were made new. Old things have what? Passed away. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your daddy taught you to be a gentleman, right? Jesus will show you what a gentleman is, right? It doesn't matter if your mother told you how to have proper etiquette. Jesus will show you how to act appropriately, right? It doesn't matter what happened before. That heritage does not identify who you are. If you're in the world, they're out there trying to find who they are because they want, listen, it is within an individual's mind to try to understand who they are and the purpose why they're here, right? So the way an earthly person does that is they try to identify with their heritage, right? And if you can help me identify with my heritage, then maybe that'll explain to me why I am the way I am, right? And maybe I can then direct my life that way. But with us, it's very different, right? The heritage that I look to is not the heritage from where my family came from. Because really, to be honest with you, this is a big dirt ball. This planet is just a dirt ball. And because I was born on this side of the dirt ball or this one, it really doesn't matter that much, does it? We're born on the same dirt ball. So we all came from dirt, right? But we are not all today, not all earthly anymore, right? Because when you have received Jesus, you have become then heavenly, right? Just as we used to take on the image of the earthly, so now today we are able to take on the image of the heavenly, right? So we have been made heavenly. Now this body doesn't look very heavenly, right? It doesn't, but it can be transformed, right? From faith to faith, this body that is earthly can be transformed from glory to glory by the Spirit of God, right? As He teaches you and shows you, so this body is transformed, right? So we can become more and more heavenly. But even from the time of Abraham, and let me give you a little bit of an example here. In Galatians chapter 3, let's talk about heritage a little bit. That's probably good. Galatians chapter 3, and look at verse number 7. It says, therefore, know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. So the Lord finds it really important to tell us that we have a father, right? Again, I love my earthly dad, right? I didn't really know my earthly grandfather, right? But it's not a matter of not loving your family. It's just that I do not identify with who my earthly parents are and what they did, right? In other words, who I am today is not a mimic image of my earthly dad, right? Because he did something wrong. People say, well, yeah, I'm just like my father. He used to do this, now I do it. Who cares? Who cares that your earthly father used to do that? You have a heavenly father now, right? So in other words, what has more power in our lives? What our earthly father used to do, or who our heavenly father has made us today? In other words, if you look at your heavenly father, and actually, that's what beholding the glory of the Lord is in a mirror, right? When you behold, God bless you, when you behold your brother, right? When you behold your brother, you're beholding who your father is, right? He said, if you have seen the Son, you have seen the Father, right? So as we behold the glory of the Son, we're beholding the glory of the one that's just like his Father, right? The Father and the Son are just alike, right? They're two peas in a pod. But the thing is, he's not ashamed to call me his brother, right? Why? Because I have been made just as he is in this world, right? As he is, so are we in this world now. So the same spirit that Jesus has is the same spirit that the Father has, is the same Holy Spirit that we have, right? The Spirit that was poured out, right, that we read of in Acts chapter 2, is the Spirit of God that was poured out upon all flesh, right? Available for anyone that would believe to receive. So when you receive that Spirit of God, you were made brand new. You were made just as he is. So as you behold him, right, you begin to see who he is. And it says that we are sons of Abraham. Like, why, if I have a heavenly father, Lord, why do you want me to identify with Abraham? Right? But here's the thing. The Lord doesn't just want you to identify with Abraham. If you have ever known man or woman or child, right, that have put faith in Jesus, and that when they talk to you about faith, they're talking about Jesus Christ and him crucified, you ought to want to have what they have. You ought to want to imitate what you're seeing. Now, I'm not telling you to imitate their habits. I'm not asking you to imitate how they talk. I'm asking you to imitate one thing, their faith. Just one thing. It's the only thing that Paul ever asked anyone to imitate of him. It's the only thing worthy for you to imitate that you see in anybody else is their faith in Jesus, right? Their singular faith. We're talking about faith in Christ, not faith that tomorrow is going to be okay. Faith in Jesus Christ, which gives you the assurance that tomorrow is going to be okay. There's a difference, right? When I was learning faith several years ago, right? To me, faith in many, many ways. Of course, I had faith in Jesus. That's why I was saved. But to me, a lot of times, faith was about, believing that I'm going to prosper. Well, again, what is, if you hear a pastor or a teacher or any other Christian tell you, don't worry, because it's a promise that we have from God that he's going to prosper us, that by itself is worthless. It's worthless, right? Because for you to tell me that I'm going to prosper, but you don't tell me how I know that I can, there's no surety there. It's just flimsy, floppy nothing, right? But if you tell me that I can prosper because it is God that gave me the power to get wealth so that he could establish the covenant that he made initially with Abraham, right? The covenant that was made with Abraham was a covenant of faith. In other words, that was before the law, right? It was a covenant of faith that was made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why the Lord, when he describes our father, right? He describes, in other words, we have a rich heritage of faith, starting with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They are the fathers of faith, but they are our fathers, right? In other words, I can identify with all three of those men. But why is it? Because they had something that I have, right? Faith in Jesus Christ, right? So the gospel that was preached, has been preached to us, was also preached to them. Let's keep going on there. It says, therefore, in verse number 7, I think I said that, right? Galatians 3:7. Right? I'll get back to the point that I was just making in a moment. But Galatians 3:7, let's read this. Therefore, know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. So the Lord wants us to identify for some reason with Abraham because of his faith, right? He says, and the scripture foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, is saying that the scriptures foreseeing, obviously, God foreseeing in the time of Abraham that God would justify the Gentiles, that's us. Right? In other words, remember, Abraham is before the Jewish nation, right? He's one man called out of the Ur of the Chaldeans, and the Lord calls him, right, begins to minister to him the gospel and wants him to believe the gospel, right? So then out of him come the Jewish nation, right? The Jewish nation comes from the loins of that man, right? As scripture would say, right? But he's saying now that God foreseeing not just that there would be a Jewish nation that would be given the gospel, but past that. He's saying God foreseeing that the Gentiles, in other words, that's past the Jewish time, that's past Christ being crucified, that's now Paul preaching to the Gentiles, and the Gentiles starting to get saved, and those 12 apostles and that gospel spreading across all the earth to where we are today in 2023, right? That says that God, it says, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel. What is the gospel? The good news about what Jesus in his time would do, in our time what Jesus did do, right? But it's still the gospel, right? Foreseeing, it says, he preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you, listen to this promise, listen to this preaching to Abraham, right? In you, he says to him, take yourself back, and you're Abraham thousands of years ago, right? The Lord said to him, in you, all the nations shall be blessed. In you, all the nations shall be blessed. So then those who are of faith are blessed with believing Abraham. So he said to him, Abraham, in you, all of the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. And you can take that like, wow, that's a heavy thing for somebody to say. Like, through you, all of the nations that will ever be upon the face of the earth will be blessed because of you, right? Or will be blessed with you. But why is that? Because anyone who has the same faith as Abraham is considered the seed of Abraham. In other words, a descendant of Abraham. So the Jewish people take very much pride in the fact that they can be physical descendants of Abraham, right? But a physical descendant of Abraham is missing one thing. You have the physical descendancy, but you don't have the righteousness of Abraham, right? Well, that's where people confuse things, right? A Jewish individual is not made righteous because you're a physical descendant of Abraham. You have to have, you can be a Jewish descendant, but you have to have the same faith as Abraham to have the righteousness of Abraham. So in reality, if any Jewish individual who does not have the same faith as Abraham is actually, as far as God is concerned, right, not a physical descendant of Abraham. Sorry, not a descendant of Abraham. They are physical, just not descendants, right? So we, even if it's, I don't know how many years it's been, let's say it's 4,000 years, right? 4,000 years after Abraham, because we have the same faith in Jesus, according to the same gospel that was preached to him, we're called sons of Abraham. So you see your identity now? Now when you see the prosperity of Abraham, when you see a body of a man that was degrading, and you see the rejuvenation through the power of God in his body, you can say, Lord, what he had or has still, right? I have, right? Why? Because we have the same faith. Therefore, we have the same inheritance, right? Abraham, if he doesn't rise up before Jesus comes back, right? Because obviously the dead can be raised. That is a thing, right? We're not teaching on that today, but obviously the dead can be raised. Jesus told us, go raise the dead. He didn't say raise them up as long as they haven't been dead for 4,000 years. He just said raise the dead. To God, I don't think he really cares whether somebody's been dead for 3 hours or whether they've been dead for 3,000 years, right? It doesn't matter. Raising the dead is raising the dead, right? We will all be raised, right? One day in the twinkling of an eye, right? And we, even that are alive and remain, will be caught up with the Lord, and we will receive a heavenly body, and we will let go of this earthly body, right? It'll be transformed into a heavenly one. But anyway, so let me bring you real quick to Romans chapter 4. Let's go there before we run out of time. Romans chapter 4, verse number 1. You know, I just remember, I didn't eat breakfast. My tummy just went, and I said, whoa, what was that? Nothing, no breakfast. I normally do eat breakfast. I don't know what happened. All right, okay. Good. Romans chapter 4, and look at verse number 1. What shall we say, what then shall we say that Abraham, our father, again, right? He's making us identify with him. People identify with lots of stuff, right? They try to identify with a company. They try to identify with being a mother, being a father, right? The problems with all of those things, right, is those things come to an end, right? There are people who their only identity is in being a parent. But then what happens when your kids leave? Then you're nobody, right? If you identify with your job, oh, I'm a doctor. Well, you're not going to be a doctor forever. So what happens when you're not a doctor? You're nobody, right? But when you identify with heavenly things, when you identify with things that are not earthly, then what happens? Then you identify with things that are eternal. You identify with your Father of faith, right? You identify with faith in Jesus Christ, which will be there forever, right? In other words, what we have with the Father will never end, right? It will always be as it is. So when you identify as a son of God, you will always be a son of God. When you identify with the inheritance that you have, you will always have that inheritance, right? When you identify with the surety that you have through Jesus, you will always have that surety forever, right? No matter what. No matter what. So that means that when things change and circumstances change, or the economy changes, or gas prices go up or they go down, or they go up or they go down, the Lord will prosper you. Even if gas is $10 a gallon, you will still drive. You will still go to work. You will still do everything you have to do, and you will still have plenty left over for you and for your family, right? Why? Because you don't prosper because the economy is good. You prosper because Jesus Christ was cursed and became accursed so that we could live prosperous lives, right? Everything that he did provided us prosperity, right? So we have prosperity living on the inside of us. We don't prosper because the economy is good. We prosper because the prosperity is in us and comes from God, right? Prosperity comes from God. He doesn't give us money, but he does give us the power to wealth. Whole series that Pastor Mike's been teaching on that if you want to know about the power to wealth more, right? He doesn't give us money, he gives us power to wealth, right? That should be a known thing. We were in Romans 1, right? What verse were we in? 1. It said, what shall we say that Abraham our father has found according to the flesh? In other words, what has he found according to the works of the flesh? What has he found about faith versus works? Like, what did he find? And why is he using him as an example? Because he's saying if he found it, you should find the same thing. In other words, imitate that, right? God is saying, look at what he found. That's what you want to know, right? You may not know it fully, but you may want to seek after that knowledge, right? What he knows, you want to know, right? What he knew, right? We should want to know. What then shall we say that Abraham our father has found according to the flesh? For if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness, right? So what that's saying there is, Abraham understood the singularity of faith, right? Faith is in Jesus, not faith in anything else. His righteousness does not come from his works. His righteousness came from nothing else apart from the fact that he believed God, right? I was just talking to somebody just a couple of days ago. They passed by the house. I don't remember what church they go to, but Miss Kim was doing a financial transaction. She was selling something that we have at the house. Somebody came to pick it up. Turns out that we knew their parents from years ago, right? And these are all Christians, right? So we got to talking, and it's interesting that this gentleman, he started talking about, he says, one of the best things that I ever did in my life, he said, I did a 40-day fast one day, he said. 40-day fast, he said, just nothing but water, right? Just 40-day fast. And he said, that's the best thing I ever did, because he said, the Lord spoke to me throughout that time, and like he's never forgotten it, right? And I said, you know what? That's fine, because anytime that you take up your time to want to seek after the Lord, I said, here's a confirmation to what you're saying. If any time you seek the Lord, you will find him, right? Because if you seek him, he will make himself known to you. But I said, but know this one thing though. You could have fasted or not fasted, and it didn't amount to a hill of beans, right? Because just because you don't eat food doesn't make heaven act, right? Us not eating food does not move the gate, like move heaven. We're like, oh, there's people that aren't eating. We must go and bless them, right? It really doesn't matter. It's not that important. It's just that when you do something and you say, you know what, Lord, I just acknowledge you right now. Like you could be in the middle of eating fried chicken, right? And in the middle of eating fried chicken, you say, Lord, I just acknowledge you. Grease running down your face, and the Lord will reveal himself to you, right? It really doesn't matter. We make things, see, what is memorable, what made that fast memorable was that he heard from God. That is memorable. That is awesome, right? And I say memorable because you don't want to forget it, right? When the Lord speaks something to you, you want to have it and you want to grow in the knowledge of that and you don't want to leave it alone. But the fast in and of itself is not, listen, what did Abraham find? That if you fast, you receive from God? No. What did our father find? He believed God and it was accounted unto him for righteousness. Nothing else qualified him to be made righteous. Only his faith in Jesus, only his faith in Jesus. In verse number 4 of that same chapter, it says, now to him who works, and that just means to him who works apart from God, right? Apart from the Spirit of God, him who just tries to do the work himself. It says, now to him who works, the wages are not counted as grace, but as of debt. So in other words, when a person works, they deserve their pay. It even applies to even earthly employment, right? When I work, you're not doing me a favor by paying me. You owe that to me. You owe it to me to pay me, right? By obligation. You're not doing me a favor. I worked, you give it to me, right? With God, obviously, it's not like that, right? We don't work and then God says, oh, you did something. Here you go. The Lord says, oh, my son did something. Here you go, right? Everything we receive is because of what Jesus has done. If Jesus didn't provide it for you, then you can't have it. If he provided it for you, then you can have it, right? So obviously, that's why we want to teach people what? The gospel, the good news, so that they can see what is theirs, what they have, right? What's their possession? What's their possession? In verse number 5, he says, but to him who does not work, but believes, right? They're a perfect example, right? If you don't work, but you believe, and then it doesn't just say believe, right? Because today you can even hear that preached. If you don't work, but you just believe God, that's not what he said. He said, but to him who does not work, but believes on him who justifies the ungodly. How did the ungodly get justified? By the cross, right? The ungodly was justified at the cross. Who was the ungodly? All of us were ungodly. Every single one of us, ungodly. And we were given an opportunity to be made righteous if we believe what? What he did. So you have to believe on him that justified the ungodly. His faith then is accounted for righteousness, right? Just as David also talks about the blessedness of a man. David said, wow, the blessedness of a man, Lord. King David said this. The blessedness of a man, he says, whose lawless deeds are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord shall not impute sin. How did that happen? Through the cross. So you see your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon. You see your fathers? Imitate their faith. It's what? It's singular. It's only about Jesus. They didn't hear about, oh, you just got, if you want a new car, you have to pin it up on your bulletin board. They didn't have cars. They didn't pin up horses that they wanted in chariots and put it up on their bulletin boards. They didn't have bulletin boards. They didn't have push pins, right? So it's not about you confessing what you want, right? You don't confess what you want and get it. Faith is confessed out of your mouth, and you receive anything that you could ever need or want because of your confession of faith, which comes from the faith that's in your mind, right? Out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth will confess. Your mouth will speak, right? It's knowing the right thing here that takes care of everything else. That's why he says, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, which comes to you only through Jesus, and I'll add all the other stuff to you. You don't have to seek after that stuff like Gentiles seek after. So that means I don't have to pin up the Mercedes-Benz that I want to drive, because I don't have to seek after that stuff. If I need a Mercedes-Benz, if I need the newest Lexus, it really doesn't matter, right? God will add it to me. It's nothing to him. Compared with what Jesus did, the junk of this earth is nothing to him. For him to add and prosper you in what you're doing is nothing to him, right? The key thing is what he accomplished through Jesus. That's the big deal, right? That's what's important. That everything else will come. He'll add it all to you, every single bit of it. It really is nothing to him. He said, the way he looks at us, right? He can give to us and dress us even better than even Solomon himself was ever dressed, right? Everything. Again, the Power to Wealth series, that'll speak to a lot of that. We won't rehash that. So if we can jump down to verse number 13, same chapter in Romans chapter 4. It says, for the promise that he would be the heir of the world, that was a big promise, right? He said to Abraham, by you, all of the people of the earth are going to be blessed through you. Believing Abraham, right? Anybody that believes like you is blessed just like you. But then he also told them, part of your inheritance, right? Your inheritance is that you will inherit the earth, right? In other words, it'll be yours. Everywhere where your foot touches will be yours, right? Well, we talked about at the beginning of service, right? That will happen one day. That will be manifest where the Lord will reign upon the earth completely. In other words, there's coming a day when Jesus will put an end to every power and authority, and the only power and authority that will be left is the authority of Jesus Christ. There's coming a day, and when that day comes, the Son will take and hand over the kingdom over to the Father, and he will be subject himself unto the Father also, but the Father obviously will not be subject unto him, but everything will be subject to the Father and to the Son and then to the church, in that order, right? Father, Son, church. Paul even said, don't you even understand that you will judge angels? It's not Father, Son, angels, people, right? That's not the hierarchy. Father, Son, sons of God. In other words, sons of God are always first, then angels, right? He says, you can't even judge little matters among yourself. Don't you know that you will even judge angels, right? In other words, there's coming a day where this earth will be governed by the righteous, right? Starting with our righteous Father, the righteous Son, and the righteous sons right after him, right? So that day is coming. But today, it says, today, obviously, that you don't see that manifest upon the earth. You don't see that government happening, but it is coming one day, right? It's going to happen. So Abraham was told that one day he would inherit the world, right? He would be an heir of the world. The funny thing is, a lot of the references that you see about that were in Romans chapter 4, a lot of the references that you see of Romans chapter 4 are speaking about the land of Canaan, right? But in reality, the land of Canaan was just a figure of the new earth, right? In other words, a land that flows with milk and honey, all of these beautiful things spoken about one piece of the earth, right, was actually just a figure of the new earth, right, and how it would be. So Abraham was told, this land that you're going to enter into, I will give it unto your seed. But actually, he was talking about the seed, singular, being Jesus Christ, right? In Galatians chapter 3, you can see that. So he was teaching him, this earth will be yours one day. That was a promise that was made to him, right? It says the promise that he would be an heir of the world was not to Abraham or to his seed, singular, right, through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. In other words, he was given that inheritance from God. He was given that inheritance only through the righteousness of faith, nothing else. So in other words, the fact that we will inherit the earth, right? The fact that today, that new earth, quote unquote, that heavenly Jerusalem, that heaven, we'll just put it like that heaven is on the inside of us. How is it that we have become heavenly? How is it that we have heaven dwelling on the inside of us? Better put so that we all understand it, right? The kingdom of God, right? Heaven. The kingdom of God is where? Within you, Jesus said. The kingdom of God is within you. What did we do to deserve the kingdom of God to be on the inside of us, right? Nothing but the righteousness of faith. In other words, we were made righteous by faith. The righteousness gave us an access to all that heaven offers. Listen, there is a ladder, right? There is a ladder from the earth to heaven. And that ladder is Jesus Christ, right? Jacob's ladder is Jesus Christ, right? If you look at that, when Jacob saw the vision, he saw Jesus standing at the top of that ladder, right? Today, right, when Jesus came, he said, I am that ladder. You will see the angels descending and ascending upon the Son of Man. He described himself as being that ladder. The way into everything heavenly is Jesus Christ. There is not a single heavenly thing that fasting or praying or doing anything offers to you, right? It is only faith in Jesus Christ. And when you pray according to faith, right, which is called the prayer of faith, that makes your prayer effective, right? Why? Because praying is not what does anything. It's the prayer of faith, right? The prayer of faith heals the sick. Praying over the sick does nothing, but praying over the sick in faith in Jesus Christ, right, does something, right? When you pray over the sick and you know that by his stripes you were healed, and it is that power in you that you can share with someone, that makes it effectual, right? The prayer of faith is effectual by what? By the knowledge in our hearts, right? By the renewing of our mind, makes our prayer effectual. So it is, he says it, another thing our fathers found, right, is that he became an heir of the world, so much so that even being in the land of Canaan, Abraham, walking around in the promised land, was still looking ahead to us, looking ahead to a earth or a house, right? A place, a nation whose builder and maker is God. In other words, he was looking forward to a brand new earth. Abraham, in the book of Genesis, right? Looking forward, he said he walked as a stranger in the land of promise. That means he was in Canaan, walking around, letting the Jewish nation who would be after him know, when you get to Canaan, that is not your destination, right? That is just a figure and a symbol of your destination. In other words, the one that God preached to the Jewish nation in the book of Deuteronomy, to love him with all their heart, soul, and strength, that was the gospel that he was giving them. Love the Lord your God is believe in Jesus Christ, right? Abraham was said, right? Another thing that our father Abraham realized, right? He rejoiced. In other words, he was happy when he saw the day of Jesus Christ. Jesus himself said, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, right? How did Abraham, that baffled the Pharisees, right? What do you mean Abraham rejoiced to see your days? You're not even 50 years old. How are you saying that Abraham, who is our father, who has died, rejoiced to see your day? You're a liar, right? But yet, what was he saying? The gospel that was preached to us was preached also to them, was preached also to him, right? That gospel was preached to him. He believed it. Because he believed the gospel, he was made righteous. What is it that you'll hear in some churches, right? That what made Abraham righteous was the fact that he believed that God was not going to kill his son. How does that make someone righteous? How could you be a sinner? How could you, listen, how could you be wrought with sin? How could you be ungodly? And because you believe that God is not going to kill your son, all of a sudden you're not ungodly anymore, you're righteous? How did that have the power to make you righteous? Because what? Because you believed that God would do it? No. There is something that he believed that made him know that God would not do that. What was it that he knew? Right? That he knew that the dead could come back to life again, right? What is it that made him know that the dead can be raised? This is the book of Genesis, right? I don't think anybody was raised from the dead yet. What would make him think that the dead can be raised? What would give him that assurance that took him 25 years? 25 years. It said that he grew stronger in faith. What was he growing in the knowledge of? That God was going to give him a son? Is that what did it? He was an unrighteous, ungodly man from the Ur of the Chaldeans, an idol-worshiping nation, from what I've heard. I don't know that for sure, right? But I do know that they were ungodly because everybody's ungodly without Jesus, right? So what would give him the assurance that God would actually give him a son and that everybody would be blessed through him? What would give him that assurance? Nothing but the gospel, right? Only when he heard and began to hear that there is one who would become a curse for you. Now, guarantee, well, maybe not so much of a guarantee, but I believe that he didn't know that his name was Jesus, right? But he did know of a Messiah because all the Jewish nation knew of a Messiah. Where did that knowledge begin? From Abraham, right? They knew that a Messiah was coming. They were waiting for him, weren't they? Right? Some of them are still waiting for him, right? But they were waiting for him. Where did that knowledge come from? It came from God preaching the gospel to them. There is a Savior that would come, one that would become a curse for you, a prophet that him you will listen to, Moses said, right? A prophet that him you will listen to, Moses said. So it says, in what verse were we even on? Nope, we weren't there, but that's a good one. Let's go to, I think we were at verse 13. Bear with me, that's not where we were, but Romans 4:13. For the promise that he would be the heir of the world was not to Abraham or to his seed through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. Verse 14, we're wrapping up. For if those who are of the law are heirs, if a person that just keeps the law, in other words, that lives by the 10 commandments, is it possible for a person like that to become an heir of the world, like Abraham was? right? Is that possible? Is it doable that a person can just live by the 10 commandments of God and live by that law and become an heir of the world? And in order to become an heir of the world, you have to be righteous, right? So can a person be made righteous by keeping the 10 commandments, right? That's the question. Verse 14, for if those who are of the law are heirs, then faith is made void and the promise made of no effect. Watch, because the law brings about wrath, for where there is no law, there is no transgression, right? Therefore, it is of faith. In other words, what he's saying is, it's not possible for a person to live by the 10 commandments of God, right? Live by the Old Testament law, live by the law of Mount Sinai, and that they could be made righteous. That's not possible, right? So he says it has to be by faith, because if it is by the law, then faith, but not just any faith, faith in Jesus is voided. In other words, what that means is, if you could be made righteous by the law, Jesus didn't have to come. Stay in heaven, right? He didn't have to come, because it is possible then for people to be made righteous by just keeping the 10 commandments of God. But if it's not, right, if faith is not void and the promise is not made of none effect, then it says, verse 16 says, therefore it is a faith that it might be according to grace, listen, so that the promise might be sure to all the seed. You see the certainty now? He's saying it has to be by faith. You know why? Because that means that then anyone who believes, right, can receive. And not only can they receive, but they can be sure that they will receive from God. They will receive God starting first with the promise of the Spirit of God. They will receive the Spirit of God. And then from there, they can be sure that God will prosper them. There is not a single Christian who should not be fully assured that God will prosper them. If you're not sure about that, you just don't know what he's done fully, right? If you don't think that God will make you well, you just are not sure of everything that Jesus provided. If you're not assured that you will be an heir of the world, right, then that means that you don't know everything that he's done. If you don't think that you have authority today on this earth over demons and over every principality and power that there is, it's just that you don't know that he seated us with him in heavenly places far above all principality, power, and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in that world, but also in this one, right? It says it backwards, but I like to say it like that so we get it, right? Not only in this world, but also in the world to come, right? Everything is under his feet. He has been made the head over all things to the church, which puts everything under our feet, right? The demons that most Christians fear are actually under your feet and are more afraid of you than you are of them, right? They wouldn't come by your house with a 10-foot pole because you're there, right? And it doesn't matter whether you know it or not, but they know the one in you, right? They know the one in you. Even if you don't know who you are, they know the one in you. You could be fearing, and as you're fearing a demon, they're afraid of you. It's not like because you're afraid, then it's like a dog that then he'll come after you. No. Even if you're afraid, they still can't hurt you. Even if you're afraid of a demon still doesn't have the authority to hurt you, right? Because your position in Christ has not changed, right? You are still the head as he is the head, right? That sounds familiar, right? He will make you the head and not the tail, right? We say that all the time. He made you the head and not the tail. What does that mean? The head of what? The head of McDonald's, the head of, ShopRite, the head of what? The head over all principality, power, dominion, and every name that is named not only in this world, but also in that which is to come. We have been made the head. You didn't earn to be the head. You didn't work your way up the ladder to be the head. He made you the head, right? He made you the head. You were not made the head. He made you the head. Let's see. Let's jump over real quick just so we can wrap this up a little bit. Galatians chapter 3. That is a great place to end. Galatians chapter 3. Galatians chapter 3. I'll share something with you quickly here. There has been a mandate that the Lord has given us as a church, right, as Reformed Church. And if you even hear the name, right, Reformed Church. In other words, what that means is reform the church. Reform, which means to change, right? Turn the mind of the church towards me, right? In the day that we're living in today, the church, it doesn't matter how many people are here or not. It doesn't matter how small or large you think that this church is. The message is as big as it gets, right? Is as large as it will ever be, right? And it is as powerful as it was the day it was spoken to Abraham. The mandate that this church has been given is teach them what the gospel is. Turn their hearts towards me. In other words, there was a prophecy that was spoken of a time that we're living in today where the hearts of the children have to be turned to their fathers, right? But what fathers is that we're talking about? It's not like, I had a fight with my dad yesterday and I'm going to turn my heart towards him because I want to make up with him. It's a heart being turned to what father, right? Our hearts, the heart of the church being turned to their fathers. In other words, the fathers that the church should be identifying with. But yet, we become very preachy, like, helping the church identify with their ancestry and with this and with that and the other thing. And if God did it for Moses, he'll do it for you. Listen, God is not obligated to do anything for anyone just because he did it for somebody else. That's not a reason. Because God, believe me, I was there 20-some years ago praying and saying, Lord, you did it for Moses, you'll do it for me. I prayed that out loud. In my living room, I remember we used to have this kind of family room with a wood-burning stove, and there was an oval rug laid on a hardwood floor. I remember kneeling on that hardwood floor. My wife was in the kitchen to my left, but she couldn't see me. And I remember praying under my breath, and I put my face to the ground, and I said, Lord, you did it for Moses, you'll do it for me. And you know what? That was a dumb prayer because that means nothing. Nothing. It didn't make a bit of difference in my life. You know why? Because God is not obligated because he did something for Moses to do it for you. That's not right. God will do for you what you see in Moses' life that he received from the Lord because of Jesus, right? Because the same Jesus that Moses believed is the same Jesus that you believe. Therefore, because of Christ and him crucified, you have been given the right or the righteousness to receive everything that Moses had and more. Because Moses did not have the Spirit in him without measure the way we do, right? We have the Spirit completely on the inside of us, never ever to have to fear that the Lord would ever leave us, right? Or that he would ever forsake us. That's obviously where that promise comes from, right? I have promised that I will never leave you and never forsake you. Why? Because the Spirit that you have is not because of something you did. The Spirit that you have is because of what he did, and that was 2,000 years ago, and it can't be undone. So that means it's permanent. It's established. It will never change, right? Never, ever change. Never, ever change. So we've been given... We know, right, that we've been given that mandate from the Lord to teach not just people that don't know the Lord, because we want people that don't know the Lord to know him, but it's the church to have their hearts turned back to the hearts of their fathers. In other words, what Abraham knew, we ought to major on, right? What Jacob knew, everything that our fathers knew about the Lord, that should be front and center in our mind, which is what? Faith in Jesus Christ. Nothing else. Nothing more, nothing less. Just the gospel, right? Just the gospel. Galatians chapter 3, we said, and verse number 13. Verse number 13. Look what it says. It says, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. It says, having become a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. You know what Deuteronomy says? Deuteronomy says that if a man has committed a sin, this is like part of the law. If a man has committed a sin deserving of death, he says, hang him on a tree for everyone to see, right? Hang him on a tree for everyone to see, and make sure that before the day is out, that you take him out of that tree and you bury him, right? Because if you don't, he says he will defile the land, right, with his sin. Now you know who that is? The ones, and that's Deuteronomy 21, 22, if you want to write that down. But Deuteronomy 21, 22 says that if you commit a sin deserving of death, you know who that is? All of us. The wages of sin, in other words, the payment for sin is what? Death. So we had all committed sins deserving of death, every single one of us, right? And who was it then that hung on a cross and became accursed for everyone to see, right? Who was it that became a serpent on a pole, right? So that people would be able to look towards him and be saved. Who was the one that hung on a cross for your sin, not for his own sin, but for your sin? So in other words, the sin that Jesus Christ brought upon himself was deserving of death, right? Just like we used to be deserving of death. Now you can say, well, why aren't we deserving of death right now? Because he died, right? How can our sin be deserving of death if he died for my sin, right? If he paid the Father for my sin, therefore then the price is paid. That's why he says, with a high price he has paid, right? So it says that Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law. What was the curse of the law? Death, right? In other words, if you were a transgressor of the law, you needed to die, right? That would be the ultimate thing that you would pay, is with your life, right? Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. That comes from Deuteronomy 21. Anyone that is crucified, right, hanging on a pole, and the way the Lord brought my mind to this was kind of a little bit interesting, because I was just praying a little bit, and the Lord brought this word to my mind. He who is and I thought I wrote it down somewhere here, but he who is polled, I think it was, like he who's polled, and the idea was, I kept thinking about that, like polled, like posted. Sorry, that's what it was, not polled, posted. So I kept having that word in my mind, like posted, like posted, like what, like post on Facebook, like posted what, right? But actually, when you post something, like when I passed by a fence yesterday. I was on a bike ride and I passed by a fence that had posted signs on it, right? So number one, what that means is it's put in plain view for everyone to see, right? So you can't say, oh, I didn't see that, that's why I trespassed, right? So it's put in plain view, and a posted sign means I've put that there for all to see, right? So Christ was the same way. He was posted that way, right? Even actually, Pilate even posted a sign on his cross that said King of the Jews, because he actually is, right, the King of the Jews. Right? We, even being spiritual Jews, right? He is our king. He's King of kings. So it was posted, and even in Galatians right here, Paul talks to the Galatians and says, you know what? Why are you so foolish? Like, I thought that you could see Christ and him crucified. Wasn't he posted before you for all to see as crucified? Why is it that after you have that image in your mind and you have learned Christ and him crucified and you were saved, why are you trying now to perfect yourself? Right? That's what he was talking to them about. So he says to that same Galatian church in verse number 13, he said, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law. In other words, you that are saying you should be circumcised, let go of the law. He already redeemed us from that law, right? He said, having become a curse for us, curses everyone who hangs on a tree, that the blessings of Abraham, you see how it brings your heart back to your father again? That the blessing of Abraham, what blessing of Abraham, right? Abraham was blessed no matter what he did. Even when Christians say, oh, how are you doing? I'm blessed. You are. Like, you really, really are, right? No matter what you do, you're blessed. Even if you lie to somebody, you're blessed. Even if you make the wrong choice, you're blessed, right? It has nothing to do. Oh, you're saying that God condones sin? No, he crucified his son for your sin. What kind of dumb question is that? Does God condone sin? He crucified his only begotten son for what you're doing wrong. So is there ever something that you would ever do wrong that Christ did not die for? Of course not, right? Any sin, past, present, or future, that you will ever commit or have ever committed, Christ died for, right? So he says that the blessing of Abraham would come upon the Gentiles. That's us, right? The Gentiles. That the blessing of Abraham would come upon us. By what? By just faith. That the blessing of Abraham might come upon the Gentiles in Christ Jesus. It says that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. Look at verse number 15 real quick. We're wrapping up here. Brethren, I speak in the manner of men, though it is only a man's covenant. Yet if it is confirmed, no one annuls it or adds to it, right? I mean, today people figure out a way to break a covenant, right? But what he says there, he says, when men agree to something, he says that's a hard, fast agreement, right? And that's an agreement within two people. So how much more then do you say now to Abraham and to his seed, who is Jesus, right? Not to us yet. Remember, we're not in this picture yet. He said to Abraham and to his seed were the promises made. To Abraham and to his seed, in other words, to Abraham through Jesus Christ and faith in him were the promises made. He does not say to seeds. In other words, he's not talking about us. He's talking about Jesus. But you can say, well, hold on, but that doesn't sound like good news. Why are you taking us out of the picture? I thought you just said that we're heirs. Why is it saying that it's not about you? Exactly. You see that, right? The promises that God made to Abraham was about Jesus. It had nothing to do with him. right? It was about Jesus and his faith in Jesus, right? So the promise was made to Christ, right? To him. Everything comes through the Lord, right? So he says, he does not say, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, capital S, who is Christ. And this I say, that the law, which was 430 years after God made that covenant with Abraham, almost 550 years after God made that covenant with Abraham, that covenant of the law from Mount Sinai, he says, cannot disannul this. It can't change that, right? Because do you know why? Because the priest is still the same. Abraham's priest is our priest, right? The Jewish nation had then the Levitical priesthood, right? But this priest had never changed. Abraham's priest is our priest. Abraham had faith in Jesus just like we have faith in Jesus. So that's why his was a covenant of faith. That's why he's called our Father. And ours is a covenant of faith. And the Lord is saying what? Remember what he believed. Like he delineates Abraham. Look at what he believed. You should believe the same thing. Imitate that, he's saying, right? Imitate that. He said the covenant, the law, it says, which was 430 years later, cannot annul the covenant that was confirmed before by God in Christ. So you read that there in black and white, right? The covenant of Abraham was a covenant based on Christ, it says there. And that the law that came after cannot disannul the covenant of faith in Christ. Abraham he's talking about here, right? Abraham. That it should make the promise of no effect. For if the inheritance is of the law, it is no longer of promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. That is, one of the most beautiful things about, that we always rehash about the finished work of Jesus Christ is that you see that it's singular, right? It is done. I never, ever, for the rest of my eternal existence, which is forever, right? Forever, I never again have to put faith in anything or anyone ever again apart from him. It's singular. The word there is simple there, but it actually means singularity, right? Single. The only thing, listen, what I told that man when I was talking to him about his fasting, I said, you know what? I said, you did one thing right during that fast. You did one thing right. You believed the Lord. That's it. You believed the Lord. And if it took, a fast for you to be able to have enough time to put your mind on him, maybe all you can think about is a cheeseburger. And now you don't have to think about cheeseburgers anymore. And you can just put your mind on Jesus, right? Whatever we do, people do all kinds of stuff. People, I like to take time, quiet. I go into my office. I close the door. I like to make it without any distractions, right? That's fine, but it doesn't matter. God can speak to me in the middle of my office when it's all quiet, and he can speak to me if I'm on the noisiest train in the middle of New York City, right? Doesn't matter. There are things that we can do to help us, right? To focus on the Lord and to acknowledge him. But I told him, you did one thing right. You acknowledged the Lord, and you heard from the Lord. Abraham, he just did one thing right. He didn't do a lot of things right. You don't have to learn a bunch of things about Abraham. You just have to learn one thing about Abraham. He had faith in Jesus. You don't have to learn a lot of things about Jacob. You don't have to go into a wilderness and sleep with a rock as your pillow in order to be able to see a vision. No, you just have to do one thing that Jacob did right? Because actually when he had that vision, he wasn't even saved, right? He didn't even know the Lord. He made up his mind afterwards. He said, if the Lord will care for me, if he will look after me, then he will be my God and I will be his, right? But he didn't even know the Lord. So there's nothing that we have to copy about Isaac, right? You don't have to try to do things like he did, or you don't have to try to imitate Abraham's behavior. Just imitate Abraham's faith, Jacob's faith, Isaac's faith, anyone's faith. Pick one, right? If someone has faith in Jesus Christ, there are people that I admire their faith, right? But at the same time, admiring their faith, they say other stupid things that I don't admire, right? But that doesn't mean I throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? There are men and women of God that I can hear today. And you know what? I agree with some of what you're saying. And when you get off the Jesus bandwagon, you start talking about something else, and you start getting all inspirational, and you start talking like anybody in the world, then I don't listen to you and I don't agree with you. But when you see people that are talking about faith in Jesus, imitate that. And do whatever they do that. What did they do? They acknowledge the Lord. If you hear somebody say the way they learned to have faith in Jesus was through acknowledging the Lord, acknowledge him then, right? But and the Lord will show you. He will make that match with Scripture. He'll show you how the things that are being said are scriptural. But the discernment, and there's the last thing that I'll say, the discernment that the Lord gives you for you to always know what I'm hearing, is that right or is it wrong? The measuring stick is so singular and so easy. If it's not according to Christ, then it's just babble. That's all. If it's not, it doesn't matter how good it sounds. Paul was saying, he said, I'm afraid for you that anybody could just preach any other gospel that sounds good to you and you'll take it, hook, line, and sinker, right? Like the church ought not to be so gullible, right? That just because somebody speaks right or looks right or speaks very eloquently, that you're just in awe of everything that they're saying, right? We should be a little bit more astute, a little bit more discerning and say, you know what you're saying, is that according to Christ or is it not? Right? There are times that you have seen the Lord, do things and it looks kind of weird, right? It's like, ooh. And right away, people say, oh, must be of the devil, right? How do you know if something is of the devil or not? What is being communicated in the end, is it according to Christ and what he did, yes or no? If it is, then you could be breakdancing up here and it don't matter, right? With all sincerity, I'm not trying to be funny, right? Because it wasn't that funny anyway, but you could breakdance. Like we could stop, I could get off the stage, we can put on some hip-hop music or whatever the heck it is, and they could start breakdancing up here, and if at the end you tell me something that what that was signifying was something that Jesus did, I will stand up and applaud for you, right? Because it doesn't matter what it looks like. I just want to see Jesus at the end of that, right? But if you do all kinds of fancy stuff and you call people up and you lay your hands on them and you speak all kinds of positive things and it's going to be good and you're going to make it and that job is going to be yours and you've been looking for a promotion and you don't say Jesus and you don't give anyone the assurance that what you're saying over them comes from what Jesus provided, then you're just speaking babble. It is worthless junk. Worthless junk, because that person cannot possibly leave from there with an assurance of anything that you've prayed for them. Nothing, right? When the apostle prayed over the man at the gate called Beautiful, and he said, silver and gold I don't have, but what I have I give to you, right? He said, in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. You know what he said there in a mouthful? He's saying everything that I have was given to me by Jesus. And since I have it, I can give it away to you because it's mine. Therefore, get up and walk, right? That helps. That helps because it gives life. And that helps because you didn't say I have magical special powers and I'm able to make you well. You said it's because of what Jesus did. He's given me the power to heal the sick, to raise the dead, and to cast out devils, right? That has significance.
We hope you enjoyed this message from Reformed Church. If you have, please share this with someone else and help us get this unpopular message to the world. If you'd like to support Reformed Church, you can do so at reforminus.com/give. Also on our website, you can take advantage of our free messages, articles, and even full discipleship courses. Start reforming your mind now at reforminus.com.